I opened for the Crystal Method and all I got was this lousy story. When talking about how popular I used to be or bragging about my days as a famous musician, jokingly calling myself a superstar DJ, I like to highlight the biggest events I performed at as well as the ones furthest away, since it implies there was a demand to see me play that was big enough to justify the travel expenses plus payment. That's what actual superstar DJs do. They have contracts they sign. They don't just take the promoter's word for it. They have management companies that handle the business side of it. The artist's only job is to arrive on time and give the crowd a show worthy of the expensive rates demanded in the contract, as well as the random, sometimes excessive demands of the writer. I almost never signed contracts for my gigs. I only messed with contracts when booking artists myself for the production company I was running in Philadelphia, years after I played with the Crystal Method. As was the case with most of my shows performing as a DJ, I had no writer for the concert. I didn't have any demands, except getting paid what I was promised by the promoter, Alejandro. Also, I assumed my roadie for the night, Squeef, would get paid for his role working security at the event, as was agreed ahead of time. For $100, I agreed to drive 2.5 hours to the other side of the island, bringing with me a crate full of vinyl records, as well as my Technics 1200 MK2 direct drive turntables and 2 Ortofon styluses. Out of that money, I had to subtract the wear and tear on the equipment, gas money to get there and back, not leaving much in terms of profit, that's right. But it was an amazing opportunity to get my name out there as an artist in my own right, not just a member of the band. Still, even before the night was over and I realized not get paid at all, there were other expenses that would have been reasonable to be compensated for, like meals while sitting around backstage waiting to play, or at the club, later waiting to get paid. Maybe if I would have negotiated better for myself, they would have been compensated. A hotel room would have been at the top of the list of things I should have required in a contract I never signed, especially since I was booked to play the same venue with the band the following night, for the Medalla-sponsored Rocket Tour. I would later find out I hadn't agreed to just one performance. I was asked to play at the after party as well, which was an all-night event at a local club featuring all the same artists from the concert at Tito Puente Amphitheater, except for the Crystal Method, who probably didn't want to stay up all night to play a second. Now I know what you're probably thinking. I was surprised too. Even though the group is called the Crystal Method, I saw no signs of methamphetamine addiction, or the use of any kind of stimulant or illegal substance whatsoever. I can't say for sure though, because even though I was able to watch the show from the VIP area, and I performed on the same stage they did just a couple hours earlier, I never met them. They were idols of mine too, so it was kind of a shame. Sure, I could have asked for their autographs or walked up and introduced myself, but not without looking like an overly eager fanboy. And I'd been around enough famous people to know that was a major turn-on. Usually, when opening for bigger acts, they are around at some point during the soundcheck, or you run into them naturally backstage. Or you find them making an appearance while you're playing, rocking out to your music. This last one is often more fantasy than reality. But I've seen footage of events I played at where I didn't even know the headliner was on stage while I was playing, jumping around rocking out as I dropped a killer new track after the perfect build-up. The Crystal Method weren't like many of the other artists I played with, though. They were rock stars in an industry dominated by 303 S and beat machines. They had contracts, obviously, but they had very specific requirements in their rider that all but guaranteed they wouldn't be bothered. They didn't need to be accessible to anyone they didn't want to be around. There was the general admission area of the concert, where obviously they weren't walking around. Then there was backstage, where you found a mix of VIPs, other artists who were also performing that night, as well as the event staff and security, which included my roadie manager, Squeef. Then you had the sponsors, women in bikinis who were handing out Medalla beers and cans of Red Bull, as well as Bacardi, with plenty of Sprite to go around. There were guests of the promoter, like one of the bands that flew up from Colombia to play the following night's Rocket Tour. This was their night of fun before having to work the next day. Awesome to see how much respect and admiration they had for the DJs playing that night, like myself. They felt lucky to be backstage with us, lucky to get in for free, to be one of the cool people, just there to have a good time. I remember seeing them on MTV Latino a few months after moving back to Philadelphia, and it gave me a sense of pride, remembering what they were like when not on camera, when they weren't the center of attention. They had a lot in common with the winners of the radio contest. These lucky people won free admission to the show, which was legendary in its own right, as well as passes to go backstage and mingle with the artists. I remember a funny interaction I had with one of them. They weren't just lucky, they were also dealing cocaine to one of the people in charge of picking winners. They were the type of dealer that acts like your friend, gasses you up, invites you to hang out, suggesting you get some really good coke for a great price from a friend. He was surprised when I said I was broke, lol. Honestly, he couldn't believe it. Here I was, the DJ for a popular rock rap band that was booked to headline the next night, who was also playing a great time slot opening for the Crystal Method, who we'd seen on TV shows like Tarde en la Noche con Luis Gonzalez and Frente Sonico. And he's broke? How does that work out? It's not like he's not working. He's big time. He's famous. But he's also a broke college student living on his own, whose only income besides support from his family is the money brought in from shows after expenses are taken care of. Playing in a band that traveled all over the island and bought new guitar strings before every set. That was saving half of the money brought in for studio time. Didn't have much to pay its 7 members after everything was accounted for. There wasn't even any money being siphoned out or mismanaged like what happens to a lot of artists. Like what happened to them on the indie label with their last record and US tour. I came along after they'd sold 10,000 CDs without receiving a dime of revenue, from the sales or from their shows. Sure, expenses were covered by the label, but that still doesn't come close to accounting for all the fun. That's why the band was saving for studio time. Ironically, that's partially why they turned down offers to manage them and market them to the majors. One of the group's biggest fans was the host of Tarde en la Noche, Luis Gonzalez. I'm getting sidetracked though, I'll tell you more about him later. The after party went until dawn. Squeef and I spent the entire night at the club, waiting for Alejandro to show up with our money. He never did. By the time the sun came up, we were exhausted, broke, and starting to realize we'd been played. Some people we'd met who lived in the San Juan area took pity on us and let us crash at their places for a few hours. It wasn't much, but it beat sleeping in the car. The next day was fairly uneventful, at least until it was time for the band to perform at the Tito Puente Amphitheater. But before that, one of the other DJs from the lineup the night before, a really friendly guy who told me he liked the set, invited Squeef and me to check out his afternoon gig. Turned out he DJ'd at a strip club and we got to hang out backstage during the set. I remember thinking how awesome his setup was. He's mixing music and women would walk right up to him. No shirt, no bra, maybe pasties, maybe not. And just hand him a CD with instructions for what they wanted done during their set. It was a fascinating behind-the-scenes view of how strip clubs operate, and honestly, it felt like the kind of casual professional respect I'd been chasing all along. Here was a guy getting paid reliably for his work, doing what he loved, treated like an essential part of the operation. Looking back on that weekend, I realized the irony wasn't lost on me even then. I'd played a huge show, opened for one of my idols, performed in front of VIPs and MTV bands, and radio contest winners. I'd been on TV. I had footage of crowds going crazy to my set. By every external measure, I looked like I'd made it. There I was, sleeping on strangers' couches, admiring a strip club DJ's work situation, and heading into another gig without ever seeing a dime from the first one. That's the difference between looking like a superstar and actually being it. Real superstars have contracts. They have lawyers and managers who make sure the money shows up before they do. They have riders that protect them from situations exactly like this. They don't drive 2.5 hours with their own equipment for $100 and a handshake. They don't spend all night waiting at a club for a promoter who never shows. But you know what? The Crystal Method probably never got an impromptu backstage tour of a San Juan strip club from a fellow DJ who genuinely appreciated their work. They probably never crashed on a stranger's couch after an all-night party, or made friends with a Colombian band who'd end up on MTV Latino, or got a glimpse of just how precarious and beautiful and ridiculous this whole music industry thing really is when you're doing it without a safety net. I opened for the Crystal Method, traveled across the island, played to a packed crowd, and all I got was this lousy story. Turns out, sometimes that's enough.